We are activating your unique self-discovery one show at a time. The Orchard of Wisdom Self-Discovery podcast at your fingertips, just waiting to inspire and invite you in discovering just how awesome you really are and how to navigate through life in joy, enrichment, personal abundance, in mind, body, spirit, heart, and soul. All the people we bring you are here to serve you on your journey of life. Do enjoy our next show. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Their Story Matters right here on selfdiscoverymedia.com. I'm your host, Sarah Troy, with a cold and a husky voice. Very sorry about that, folks. But my wonderful guest is Robert Ramos. Back in the 70s. What a wonderful time it was. Did I say it wrong, Ramos?
No, either's fine. Either's fine, Sarah. Thanks for
Okay.
having me.
Back in the 70s, it was what some people would call hippie time, but it was a time of expression and of people in discovery of themselves and kind of bucking up against the establishment. And what we're going to be talking about today is Robert looking back at his father's life as an immigrant coming to Miami, to the living on the beach and the kind of life that they lived on the beach there, and going from that carefree um, fishing and surfing and just hanging out on the beach, completely being free spirited, into kind of growing up and having families and providing from them and all of that. He says at the heart of this beautifully directed and edited film by Robert is a powerful, never before told story of a bygone era on Miami Beach, a time and a place inhabited by surfers, skaters, and diverse culture of young Cuban immigrants, vibrant Jewish population, and other communities that form a unique mosaic exclusive to the region. And South Beach Shark Club, a great poster here. He's done a documentary on it. There's a wonderful trailer here that I actually have on his show posting to look at it. You know, it had its good and its bad moments. Certainly kind of the way the sharks were treated weren't necessarily very nice, but it was very much a carefree time and of young immigrants coming from a country that was very fearful and restrained, suddenly having a beautiful beach and freedom and everything in front of you could be quite a mind game in many, many ways. I'm sure your father has shared some incredible stories with you, and I'm looking forward to hearing some of those stories here today. What drove you to do the documentary? Was it that you were just inspired by your father's journey?
Yes, that was definitely part of it. These are kind of like stories that were passed on to me, almost like someone would read fairy tales to their kid before they go to sleep. And so, like, it just like the way my parents spoke about growing up in Miami Beach and the freedom they had as children, like to just the environment back then was completely different. And yes, that's something to do with the time, but it also has to do with growing up, like, on an island or, near a beach. And yeah, it's just something I was always infatuated with, and I also romanticize. So I try to tell the story from the perspective of me as a child, like hearing these kind of larger than life uh, personalities and legends, as well as just like the landscape and what everyday life was like back then. But the story really started becoming prevalent to uh, myself as a filmmaker when I went on a fishing trip with my uncle. We were kind of like sleeping in the back of a truck underneath the stars on a bridge, like in the Keys, which is actually very beautiful.
Mm.
And he was just telling me these stories about his friend Rene de Dios, who was one of the main characters in the film, and things kind of started unraveling from there. I just went down that rabbit hole, and there was a lot of media about Rene, and there was a lot of old photos, and it just started from there. And so the more I found, the more I realized that there was a story to be told here, and that there was enough to possibly turn it into a feature film. So it was started as a short film, as a short project for school, and then we parlayed that into the feature film.
Um, People, when they look back, don't realize how much ground people laid for people that walk on today, right? The 70s, as I'm a 70s chick, that was when I was in my young youth, teenage into young adulthood. I was in South Africa at the time, and of course, the beach was the place to go. It was the place that everybody congregated. We had braai places on the beach, barbecues, and there was the surfing, there was the everything. It was the place to meet. Um, and you know, South Africa is an immigrant country as well. So you had all sorts of diversity there. It was actually wonderful. It was wonderful because it was so freeing. And I came from England away from pearls and tweed and uniforms, you know,
Hmm.
into this wonderful let your hair down and let your spirit flow. So I can fully understand how people literally did let the hair down and just experience life. But coming from, you know, 40s, 50s, and 60s of so much restraint, and especially being an
Hmm.
immigrant coming from Cuba at that time, it must have been quite an experience for them, perhaps a little bit too much of an experience.
Yeah. And I mean, I know that, at that time in Cuba when my parents left, I mean, it was after the revolution. And so, um, like both of my grandparents on either side, they came in like the freedom flights in the late 60s, early 70s. And so they worked to be able to leave this country and just leave everything behind and start a new life.
Mm.
What I think that pier represented for them was like it has something to do with that, with the freedom and being in a new place, and then also having this inherent connection to the water, like
Mm.
as an island person as well. I mean, even England is also an island if you think about
Yes.
it too. So I mean, right now I'm talking right now from my apartment that's on an island in it's called Normandy, that's just off Miami Beach. So I mean, there's
Right.
just a connection to it that's you know it goes, it's just hard to describe. And I think that yeah, in that era, like the freedom they had to, I mean, they just basically ended up sleeping on the beach and hanging out and kind of like even trying to hustle up a couple dollars catching fish and selling them to local markets, and sometimes catching food for the day so they could actually
Mm.
eat. That's the
Mhm.
stories that my uncle told me back in the day. So I mean, I think that represented the pier, and Miami Beach represented you know a way out for them, and a way also to that they were taught disciplined by some of the older guys who were around on the pier back then, or hanging around there, teaching them to surf, teaching them to fish, showing them a way of a way out from the kind of life that they had. A lot of them were very poor. A lot of people were sleeping in studio apartments with a family of 4 or 5, and this kind of started maybe some kind of thought process in their mind to to go out and like whereas I mean at that age it's not like they can go out and get jobs or help provide for their family yet, but they would like catch a bunch of fish and sell them and bring home some food for dinner, things like that.
Necessity can always create opportunity,
Yeah.
right? So, I mean, that's the thing when I think what kind of this generation may not understand is the freedom of the 70s and actually what it meant. 60s was very much kind of that revolution and bucking the system. 70s, of course, we had the Vietnam War and
Hmm.
everything else that was going on. But it was very much a time of self-discovery, of exploration, of what is the soul, what is the spirit, what is the heart. And water is actually a wonderful conduit. It's a wonderful place to really get connected with one heart and soul. So I can understand the draw to the water and just to that kind of lifestyle, because it is a place to discover yourself. And get really immersed in that discovery. But it isn't a sustainable place to live,
Hmm.
unless you become the fisherman or unless you kind of it becomes your trade in some way, but not what they were doing, right? They were catching fish to either eat or sell to maintain themselves, but it wasn't kind of a career choice necessarily, was it?
Yeah, I mean, it was a necessity, I think, at first, but it also became something that would later define them, and maybe taught them lessons that were bigger than what they knew they were getting into. I mean, there's also like you said, there's so much connection. Like there's a special kind of connection with the ocean that I think you get from being in it, and especially from diving, from
Mm.
surfing, and a lot of fishermen also miss it, I think too. So there's also that as well, and it's just it, I just think it's quite interesting how this whole community just was revolved around that, and I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought a little bit, but
That's
for
okay.
was the initial question was
No
again?
question, just conversation. So basically, though, whenever you're in a kind of a harmonious flow and you're really enjoying things, there's always either somebody or something that kind of takes things to the extreme. And then
Hmm.
suddenly you have surfers, from what I understand from the intro of the video, swimming with sharks or capturing sharks and kind of not necessarily doing it in a harmonious way that, we push the limits, but sometimes we don't know how to
Sure.
register when it is the boundary of no further.
Sure. I mean, this story is also, it's about a lot of things, and it is also about obsession, and
Mm,
in one way, and this man becomes so obsessed with catching sharks and is so overtaken with this one character, Renee. That's what he represents, that extreme thought and that obsession, and so yeah, it's there's also another character, Hammer, in the film, who's like just he kind of just throws a line out, and it's not really something. He's really there for the moment, for the
mm,
environment, and for the culture and for the camaraderie, and to teach young kids a skill and things like that. So I think you see these different representations of
mm,
what fishing could mean to different people. Whereas there's another character, Shannon, that it quite literally gets him off the street, where he's
mm.
wrapped up in gangs and drugs and all this, these like very bad and dark things that were happening at the time of his childhood. And fishing, also represents a way out. So I think it's like different ways of looking at it.
When we actually do look at it through the eyes like of a documentary film like this, you know, we're not one size fits all.
Mm-hmm.
We've all got different perspectives on life, different experiences with life, and that is going to be, how we reflect on life and how we participate. It comes from those experiences. And, saying a gang leader, really, once you're in a gang, it's very hard to get back out again. And,
Mm-hmm.
you are instructed on what to do. And if you don't do, it's a sign of weakness, and there's no weakness in a gang. And so very often for people, there is a no way out. So for him to actually find a way out and step into, I suppose, an opposite to what he's used to of a freedom of
Mm-hmm.
expression, freedom of discovery, freedom to just be and not be dictated to would be quite an experience for him.
Yes, for sure. And I mean, in the third act of the film, that's Shannon discusses all this, and what it means to him, and why he, feels so strongly about this time in his life, and what all that represents. He's the one nowadays who's kind of keeping this way of life alive in a more sustainable way.
Mm,
Ideally, I'm not saying that they're also perfect with what they do in terms of catching sharks. And they only practice catch and release nowadays. They do
good.
work with FWC, which is Florida Fish and Wildlife, like hand in hand to make sure that the regulations are being carried out properly, and that the fisheries are are sustainable, and they also work with NOAA, and which is a national oceanographic they other scientists. Dr. Samuel Gruber was one from back in the day who spearheaded a lot of shark research in the 80s and 90s. And so they actually used to work hand in hand with these guys later on. Some of it's touched upon in the film, mostly towards the end. They discuss like that, that they practice conservation nowadays, and that this kind of way of life is changed, and it represents something bigger than just killing a shark or something like that.
I mean, the for some people, capturing that shark or whatever is an ego-driven thing.
Oh,
Right,
absolutely.
right. And of course, the Oriental shark fin soup. and Japanese with the dolphins and everything else. It's
Yeah.
totally inhumane when they go to that extreme. So I'm very
Yeah.
happy to hear that that conservation is there, and that basically, his life evolved into that consciousness of, of not just capturing to do whatever with, but conserving. Um, we are kind of what I call rape and pillagers of this earth. This earth
Yeah.
provides us everything, and we stepped into opulence. And a lot of that opulence did start happening kind of 60s and 70s. 70s was the epitome of it,
Hmm.
going into the 80s, where everybody was instructed more is more. And you have to
Hmm.
have more to be important. And it doesn't matter who pays for that more, as long as you have it. And we see that in so many practices and so many representations in film of that attitude where we're really kind of the earth can't keep up with the resources that I can't
Hmm.
keep providing the way you are using, and your attitude and your ways have to change, which of course we're now actually paying the price on. But it was also a time of getting away with a lot, and that meant the police force, that meant
Hmm.
governments, that meant industries. There just really wasn't any restraint anywhere along the line.
Yeah, I think, obviously that's important. You see it in, you make a really good point about, you know, the decadence of, the 80s and things like that in the 70s. And like, yeah, this is like back then totally like an ego driven who, these guys are like, the bravado, the machismo-ness of it and all that. And I think that, yeah, Renee is the embodiment of that in the film. And you see like where that leads him. It leads him to a very dark place where, he loses his wife. He is quite almost loses his life. Actually ends up doesn't, I don't want to give everything away, but he does end up losing
Paying
his
the
life
ultimate price. Yeah.
quite literally for his obsession. And like, he goes, it kind of peaks in like the second act. He goes out to the Bahamas to break the world record for the biggest shark caught on rod and reel. And he's so obsessed. They like go through a storm that they shouldn't have even crossed over to the Bahamas from in Miami. And he puts, other people's lives in danger,
Yes.
basically. And they end up hooking a massive great white shark and fighting it for 14 hours and sink the boat, like literally like in like Quentin Jaws. And now they're out there floating for 3 days on a capsized boat, all because of, you know, something that originated with this ego driven kind of obsession that at this point it could be completely meaningless because I mean and in a way he may be missing the point for to something bigger, and
Exactly.
so it's kind of interesting like what he represents.
Well, he's a great lesson to everybody that obsession only leads to destruction.
Yeah.
And it's not just your destruction, it's the destruction of everybody that's in your vicinity, or
Hmm.
anybody that's in your way, because they're so obsessed, they really don't care who else pays the price as long as
Yeah.
they get. We see this still today, but a lot of what we see today in the younger people, I feel it is more, um, I think, a quicker wake up call is to that this obsession is leading to destruction. We're in an era where the camera is on you. You can't get away with anything. Everything is out there. And I think for a lot of people that may be in their 40s and their 30s, in realizing, hey, this is not the path. But you still got some that are not blinded to the truth. But when you are looking at people in their 60s, 70s, they're from that era. And so
Hmm.
they're still living in that mindset. And they still believe they are entitled, which is a word I absolutely hate,
Yeah.
because that entitled leads to opulence, which always costs so many more people to pay for that opulence than what they pay for. So we're still seeing a lot of it, and we see it a great deal in politics.
Hmm.
That opulent mindset still there. So having a representation of somebody so obsessed is a good reminder to people that obsession does not pay. You pay for that
Yes.
obsession.
Yes, agreed. Whereas I don't know if you saw the full length film, but this other character, Hammer, JD Hammer, in the film I was saying before, like he's kind of like almost like a he's in tune with what's going on like in nature, and he's just like a fixed object on these land-based fishing spots all over South Florida, and he kind of like he's kind of got that 60s attitude, like hippie attitude. I mean, he comes from that time as well, but he spends more time out there like sleeping on a bridge or sleeping on a pier these days now at 70 years old than he
Hmm.
does at his own house.
Yeah.
And for him, it's all about, yeah, it's just about the feeling of being out there. It's about watching the sunset. He loves taking pictures of the sunset. He'll send me them even now still, but and he's tell me to come out there. So yeah,
So he's
he
in tuned.
it's
He's in tuned with nature and what nature has to give, right?
yeah, I would say that's what he represents. And he's actually he's Renee's teacher. So it's kind of interesting also, the case study of them and their relationship with each other, how Hammer may have been trying to teach Renee something that Renee overlooked and kind of perverted into his own, ego driven desire to just, to chase these sharks and, be the best, number one, as he would call it.
Right. We have to realize, although it's a very hard lesson for people like that to learn, this ego driven is a lack of self-worth. It's a lack of
Yes,
your own, it's an insecurity that's screaming
sure.
inside of you. And they're always trying to get that one more, as that will be the cure for their insecurity. It leads very much to narcissism
Yes,
even some psychopathic behavior along the way. And it's the game. There's no ownership with people like that at all, and no accountability. It's everybody else's fault. Everybody else is out to get them, and they're going to get what they want, and they don't care how they get it. And it's very, very destructive, not only to them, as I said, but to everybody else around them. Where you have the opposite side of a guy that literally sleeps under the stars, watches
yeah.
the sunrise and the sunsets, and is so in tune with what this beautiful world has to give us and what the cosmos has to give us, that he's truly a part of it. So it's a completely yin yang
Sure.
there.
Yeah, and additional to that as well, I mean, it's Hammer also, takes in all these kids off the street
Mm.
and tries to teach them that as
Yes.
well. So it's really important, like what he represents as someone who's trying to show people this his beautiful interpretation of life and his beautiful understanding of these things. So it's like JD Hammer is just a fantastic uh, character in to show opposite of Renee, to represent some just the other side of things. So
Well, he lives in peace, and what he through that actually being the peace, because we can't find peace until we become the peace. And so he actually is being the peace that shows others how to become the peace in their own lives.
yes, you could say that definitely.
But it's a choice, isn't it? Because for some people, they can't find that peace within them because they're too busy chasing an illusion or, again, that insecurity. And a lot of people think that power, I mean, this is how gangs get to be gangs, is that power over other people. They think that that is empowering. It isn't. To truly be someone powerful is to empower others, not to bring them down or control them or dictate them or terrify them. That actually is a sign of your own weakness.
Yes, agreed entirely.
So your father was an immigrant from Cuba.
Yes,
Both parents, but were you born in the States?
I was born in Miami Beach actually. So I'm in a unique position to tell the story that we're
Yeah.
telling as well, just because I was born on these grounds as well.
Yes.
So,
It's
but
your
yeah, my
soil.
my parents were they came here from Cuba when they were very young. My father first went to New Jersey, then I think they stuck out like a winter or two, and they said enough of that. Came down to Miami
Yes.
Beach, um, and yeah, and my mother as well, and yeah, I mean Miami Beach even now is actually like a pretty tight knit community, despite what most people might think. Everyone who grew up down here pretty much knows everyone who grew up down
Mm.
here, or the degrees of separation, or there are very few. Um, and yeah, it's like when I grew up down here in the '90s, there weren't any like there weren't as many or if any at all like on Lincoln Road, which is one of the promenades like down here in Miami Beach. That like there was no like chain stores
Yeah,
or just that there was it was all mom and pop shops and
yes.
it just a different time even back then. So
A
I
nice
felt it was
community.
really sure. I felt it was when I started going through some of these images, these archival images of like seeing the old Miami Beach and just like this really humble, beautiful beachside community. Like I just wanted to make sure that people saw this and people can understand, this forgotten history of, the small little place that I just happened to be from. But I wanted to share that with others, and I thought it was really cool to be able to immortalize that and immortalize where my parents grew up in that era, and to give them these images almost like a yearbook of their lives in some
Mhm.
parts of the film.
People don't realize that kind of community is where the unity is. Everybody in that community looked out for each other, good and bad. They were there to support one another because that was their strength as a community. And when you do have these big box stores coming in, which promote more, 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 more is more rather than less is more, um, you start desensitizing that wonderful sense of service and community of support of one another. And I think we're beginning to realize as a society that we need to go back to that. Have your box office and things, put them out over there. People can drive to them if they want them. But in your like downtown cores, in your certain areas, go back to that mom and pop, go back to those unique stores because ultimately people go out to buy something that they need, but they want to go out and communicate with each other, share the weather of the day or what's going on in the world, or did you know about this and did you know about that? That was the community where everybody came together. And I think part of societal's problems is the fact that we've become so detached. And now, of course, with online buying, that we aren't there to connect with one another again. So I think it's a great lesson for people to look at that, not just romanticize about and go, it worked. How about we bring it back?
I mean, yeah, I love that. I totally agree. I think it's really important to protect, what we do have left of that in different communities as well.
Yes.
So, right now, people you say Miami Beach and they just think probably like almost like just a crazy party town with like a lot of tourists and just lawlessness sometimes, and just it sometimes it is like that too. But there are these little pockets like right now where I'm living is they consider it North Beach, but there's still the mom and pop shops. There's still like the local hardware store, bicycle shop, supermarket, things like that. You could walk pretty much to any of these places, and I have like a butcher that I can like get food from, and I have a local if I want to go to the bar and have the bartender there, and it's like there's no TVs in it or anything. It's like
Yeah.
a
People
communal
actually talk to each
place.
other.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's
What a
so
novelty.
it's yeah, so it's really cool, and like yeah, I agree. I want to see that stuff protected, and be able to, if you want to live around in a in a big shopping mall area where there's condos and a million big box stores, okay, that's fine. But I like living around all the mom and pop shops and
Yeah.
close to the beach, and it makes me feel connected to the community and everything. So
I live in a wonderful town, city called Victoria, BC. It's on Vancouver Island, so it's on an
oh
island
great.
surrounded by water. And it is all sorts of unique restaurants and shops and things like this. Of course, a huge big tourist town. A lot of people come here from all over the world. And then where my daughter is in Nanaimo, it's more about nature base. There's more lakes, more climbing, more this and that. Nanaimo used to be mining town. And then they took all the money out of the mining town and put it in Victoria 100 years ago. And so the box office, the box stores came in, but they went kind of a little bit further outside of Nanaimo, and they're there, multiple. So my daughter who lives there has to drive half an hour to get to one of those stores, right? So it can be inconvenient at certain times, but at the same time, downtown, which they're busy restoring, is filled with lots of little restaurants and stores and unique places. And more they're trying to bring back that kind of sense of downtown community where people all know who each other and there's a place to go. And I think, we have to, my generation screwed things up for your generation. And so your generation has to look at it and go, we've got to take it back. We've got to learn from these lessons, learn from the lessons of the opulence and where it got him, the fixation, and learn from, sleeping under the stars and being at one with the cosmos and nature, and look to where is our balance in life. So although this is intriguing to learn about the history of that time, the best story is when it lands with somebody and they reflect on their own life of what they can do about their own situation now.
Sure. And as a filmmaker and as a writer, I think, it's that there are those in our film, like those things do come through, and they have to be, it's not that they're obviously stated necessarily, but there's a comparison being made between these different mindsets and, and also comparison and the contrasting mindsets themselves too, and what they represent. So I think that people get that from it. And yeah, I hope that when people see it, they gather from based on what we're talking about, these greater ideas and what these characters represent as they move around the same environment with different perspectives. So.
You can have the party of life. All right, you're in the party of life, the surfing, the thising, the thating, you're immersed in that party, but there's always a after party. And there's always like, are you going to be hungover? And I don't necessarily mean drunk hungover or drug hungover.
Yeah.
I mean hungover from the euphoria of that, where reality steps in and say, this isn't sustainable. What are you going to do now? And it could be quite, I think everybody should have that kind of freedom in some form or other when they're young, just to become connected with, universe and planet within themselves, and then go seeking what you can do with it. So I think it's a highly recommended thing for people to be kind of step into the free will and experience of life. Going from school to college to work, where is that freedom just to find your expression? So I think it's really important, but it's knowing when, okay, I've learned enough. How do I use this in the next chapter of my life, and not getting caught up in repeating the same chapter?
Sure. I agree. Yeah, it's interesting. This reminds me of like some of what I've gone through as as a filmmaker and a storyteller. Because I felt like, just like you said, just getting out of high school and going directly into college and kind of not really knowing what you want to do. I was always very interested in anthropology, and philosophy and writing, but I realized at one point, like I didn't really have much to write about, so I wanted to go out and live and learn a skill and see the world, and have an opportunity to travel. I ended up actually working on boats for a long time, and that's kind of like this movie's an expression of both my desire and my need to tell stories, and also my experience as someone who has been connected with the water, like as a diver, as a fisherman, as someone who's I used to do like deliveries with boats. We would like go for days out in the Mediterranean and days out in the Caribbean, just cruising through the islands and things like that. And yeah, I think it's important to have those experiences in life and to broaden your horizons and become a more full perspective on
Yeah.
things, on yourself as well.
100%. And the sea has so much to tell us. I love the fact that the new Avatar movie is based
Yeah.
kind of in water, which is going to be really wonderful to see. I have a quick story of the 70s, which might get to do with sharks. I was in South Africa. We didn't have TV. at that time. And Jaws was coming. All we saw was shark posters, and all we were hearing on the radio to do with this was durrum, durrum, durrum. And all we knew was something to do with sharks, and that was it. And I was in Mauritius, and I'd swum quite far out. And I realized I'm quite far out. I need to go back in. But I literally could sleep on the water. I love just laying on the water. And I'm lying there all peacefully and relaxed. And all of a sudden in my head, durrum, durrum, durrum. And I could start feeling fish swimming underneath me. Right. And your mind plays such tricks. And then it was like as fast as I could getting back to shore. And my mother was on shore. And somebody said to her, "Who's that idiot out there? Doesn't she know the shark's out there?" And my mother said, "That idiot's my daughter." But it's amazing. I hadn't seen the movie. I didn't know what the movie was about other than it was, sharks. But that music played in my head, and that's all I could feel, which was quite something. And then, of course, when I saw the movie, it kind of became even more impactful. And that's the beauty of the artistry of movies, isn't it? Is that how much it can relate to your own life in an obscure way.
Sure, definitely. Um, yeah, I wanted to briefly touch upon that swimming out into the ocean like that though too. Yeah, when I was younger, I used to I, I I got my diving license when I think I was like 12 or 13. I was
Wow.
always like terrified of it still, like, even to this day. So I used to do like these like meditations. I'll swim out into the surf, past like the wave break and kind of just float and try to silence my mind. And then I'd pretend that there was just 100 sharks right underneath me and I can do nothing about it. And then like it's like you train your brain to find this like calmness, this inner calmness, and to relax and control your breathing. And yeah, the ocean has taught me a ton about that as well.
Mm.
So I love that story. But the other question was about movies, about
Mm.
um
Just how movies, when we see them, how it can be relatable to our own life, whether it's to do with water or not. It
oh
doesn't have to
sure.
be the same story. It's just that a good movie will have you pause and reflect on your own life. Draw that
Yes,
comparison of how you feel, or are you being connected, or are you traveling that path? And I like a good book and a good movie, like a good song,
for
helps
sure.
you pause and reflect.
Yeah. Well, we like to say with our film, and particularly, it's not a film about sharks, it's a film about people.
Right.
And it's, one of the challenges of making a movie like this too is like, I mean, how, like, I don't think anybody would really want to watch a movie about fishing, to be honest with you. It's
Yeah.
not very, it doesn't
Unless you're a
seem like
fisherman.
something that's what you would think. But so that was in a way challenging. And I remember we did a Q&A a long time ago for the 15-minute version of this film. And someone was like, you should make a movie about golf because this was like, this is so interesting. And I just never thought I would be interested in fishing. So
Right.
it's kind of like the fishing is just, it's just a subculture of, and a way to like, I mean, really at the heart and soul of this, it's really just a story about people and, their
Yeah.
interactions, and then people do, identify with them, even though they may not have grown up in the area or, grew up fishing or care about fishing or anything like that. So you do have to find a common human story that people can it resonates with them.
It's also we're in an era where we're beginning to become more ethical about our practices, and even in our fishing.
Sure.
Like in the movie Avatar, when she kills something, thank you for your sacrifice, right?
Sure.
Um, where you have the other character, opulence, 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 more and more. I've got to have bigger and bigger. It's like, fish to eat or fish to supply food. Catch that shark but release. And I think it's like we're learning now there's a synergy between us, Homo sapiens, and the rest of living creatures on this planet. And we got very arrogant in our thought that this planet was purely here for us. And we're now in that consciousness of learning that no, we are part of the planet. We've been a huge part of the problem. We can be a part of the solution by being in synergy. Like the food is there to provide for us, but don't take more than you need.
Sure.
Respect the sacrifices of others. And it's not out to how much fish I can get or how big the fish is. It is about the whole entire experience, being on the boat, out there fishing. The ocean has such a beautiful voice. And it can be very angry. Be careful when it gets mad, right? Respect that ocean.
Yes, totally. I think yeah, being on the ocean, spending time there, it teaches you a lot about uh, 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 about just I mean like you said, it could be therapeutic, and it can be teaching you lessons that can apply to so many different facets of your life, and then also it can represent this 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 sometimes violent or unknown, or this just it's nature, man. And like, yeah, sometimes the sometimes the dog scratches the fleas too, and so
Yeah,
you do have these, we it's humbling as a human being. The ocean is extremely humbling, and sometimes whether it be a major storm, or just getting caught in, like, something like that, it will humble you very quickly, like. And
yeah,
you might think, second guess some of their these or have this perspective for some of these decisions where we have kind of messed up so much different stuff by either overfishing or
mhm,
having irresponsible practices with pollution and things like that you see.
yeah, yeah. You know, we can't master the ocean, but we can master our presence on the ocean. There is no controlling that ocean.
Yeah.
All right. Um, another story of my dad who was had a lumber company, and he had people out sick with the flu, and they had these forklifts to lift up these planks of wood. And it's before they had canopies over the forklifts for protection, which they got afterwards. And 24 planks of wood landed on my dad's head.
Oh my
And
God.
so he had this huge big gash across his head and huge big stitches. But he loved sailing. He had his Thunderbird, beautiful wood boat that he would go out in. And he was going to go out in their stitches or not. So he put his old crash helmet on from his racing car days and went out. And suddenly the water's turned and they're all trying to come back in. And the water is angry and pushing the boats up against the shore. And one by one, they're trying to come in. And we're standing on the shore, my mother, myself, and the dog. My brother is with him out there, and we could see he's trying to wait his turn. And suddenly the water flips his boat, and we completely freak out.
Oh
I think
God.
I'm about 8 or 9 or something like that. And there's my daddy. And then all of a sudden, my daddy just comes up the steps with water pouring from his helmet. You know, we didn't know whether to hit him or hug him. But he was an experienced sailor, but when that ocean changes, it changes. And I think this is, again, another metaphor for life is that don't
Sure.
become complacent, right? You can be a great master, but again, things like life is the bigger master. We've got to learn to adjust to it.
Yeah, you have to respect these
Yeah.
systems that are bigger than you, and approach them, you know with with caution and respect, and and understanding as well.
There's always a price to pay, and that one character paid the price ultimately. And then you had the other guy who rather live under the stars than under a roof, because he's so in tuned. And both of them, in some ways, are kind of a little bit of an extreme. It's about finding
Yes,
that happy balance, isn't it? The beach and the water and surfing and fishing and all of that is always going to be a part of life. But again, look at coastal communities. Coastal communities, Hawaii, anywhere around the world, the fishing or the coastal communities, they have a respect and an understanding of the ocean, their part in it, what they can do and what they can't do. And it's a totally different vibration they live on.
absolutely, absolutely. I think
So
yeah, go ahead.
no, no, go on. Do you think?
No, I was just gonna say, it's like the story that we're telling is just about one small little community here, but I think other people who've grown up in coastal communities will identify with the story at its heart.
Mm.
So I think that's cool.
We see all sorts of movies to do with the ocean, and you could get quite seasick sometimes, be watching a boat go up and down. And and how the tide can change. And again, your attitude on that water is whether you survive or not. I did a show many years ago of a guy. He was on watch at night and everyone was asleep, and a freak wave threw him overboard. And everyone was asleep, so they didn't know he was missing until morning.
Oh my
And he had
God.
these particular boots on, and he took these boots off and used them in his hands, and that's what kept him afloat for something like 18 hours before anybody found him.
Oh my
Right? So
Lord.
again, it's the let's respect that ocean. And we let us also have some gratitude for the fishermen out there, that go out there every day and what they face because they never know what they're going to face. But I was never a beach bunny, but I loved the beach and I loved the swimming and I loved just immersing myself in the water and just laying there and just letting it speak to me. Same, I have the relationship with trees and breeze as well. They're all very important to me. But there's something about immersing your body into the water and just laying there and just letting it take you, letting it just flow, and then coming back out on a lovely golden beach. There's something about it that really is kind of quite capturing, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think some, people connect to the source through different ways. Some people, in the mountains, some people um in the forest or, in different places. And yeah, for me it's the ocean. It gives me a very good peace of mind. And I like smelling the salt water and the
Yes.
breeze and everything and just being around it. And I think just, a lot of it, like what you see in the film as well too, is that like a lot of it is just being out there. It's just
Yeah.
all about just being out there and having a human connection with other people and sitting around a campfire. And
Yeah.
it's just if you get a fish or something like that, it's just a plus. It's just kind
Yeah.
of like the reason to be out there, but that's not really the real reason.
Yeah.
These other things, these other magical things kind of happen when you're engaged in that kind of stuff with other people.
Of course, back in the 70s, I don't know if it still happens, but around that campfire, somebody would bring out a guitar.
Yeah.
Right? And then the singing would start. You're underneath the stars, you're around this campfire. You can hear the waters just lapping up against the shores. You've got that clear salt sea air that's just cleaning the lungs. It is really kind of something quite magical. And I think a lot of young people are missing out on that today because they're perpetually on their phones and
Yeah.
looking for everything everywhere else. And it's like, put the damn things down and go and experience something that no phone or no apparatus can give you.
Yeah. Agreed. I think yeah, it's really important to disconnect from the phone. For me personally, I know that when I'm in those situations like that for me personally usually revolve around the water. Like my phone is just it's out of sight and out of mind. It's just
Yeah.
I'm really like connected into the experience itself. So sometimes that could be, when I'm lucky, cruising in the Bahamas or being like somewhere in like a less populated, like, island somewhere in the Caribbean, or sometimes it can be right here in my backyard in Miami Beach as well. And just yeah, just fully immersing into that experience. So
We took my kids to Fort Lauderdale for a holiday, two teenagers and one younger one. And the teenagers went off with their father to go snorkeling, and I can't do that. So I was actually in Gilligan's Water, just laying on the water the whole day. The trouble is, I forgot my sunscreen and I came out like a baked lobster. So, good old aromatherapy kind of helped that, but it is, it just does something just so utterly calming, almost tranquilizing to do with that water. It's really quite exquisite, and especially the waters around there because it was
yeah,
just so clear and so beautiful and so harmonious, even
yeah.
amongst all the tourists. So,
Yeah, we have to
you,
respect the sun too. The sun will burn, will
oh
really
boy,
will
yeah,
really mess you up also too, especially
oh
for
yeah.
days and days out there. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I had a mixture of aromatherapies I put together in cream, and the first night I looked like a lobster and I felt like one too. And then within 3 days I'd calmed down. But I had actually burnt myself in South Africa where you could probably had fried an egg on my body. And
Yeah.
the peeling of the skin afterwards was almost like
Oh my God.
leprosy, things coming off. It was, I
Yeah.
don't encourage that at all. Um, but it's please just get out there and enjoy it. Now, this movie, when is it out? How do people watch it? When is it coming?
Well, we actually just got back from Doc NYC, which is the largest documentary film festival in the country. And we showed over there, and then it was streaming for about a week after that. I think yesterday was the last day you could watch the whole feature film. So right now, we're just encouraging people to like get the film on their radar. I mean, they could see a lot of trailers online. SouthBeachSharkClub.com has a lot of information about the story, pictures, videos, things like that. So eventually we'll be looking to have the film on like a streaming platform, and we're
Mhm.
seeking distribution currently. So if you stay up to date with the film on the social media or our mailing list, like you'll be able to see it when it comes out, ideally in the next couple of months.
And of course, it's sharkclub.com, but it's also on all your social medias, uh,
Yes.
Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all South Beach Shark Club. And of course, YouTube, you've got the trailer there and you've got a few other things there as well. A great poster here too, Legends and Lore,
Mm-hmm.
the big shark. And, we do have a fascination with sharks. My daughter was afraid of them, but I finally did the water cage to overcome that fear. Um,
Oh my God.
and you see other people filming that are actually, swimming with the sharks and playing with the sharks, and they're not all out to get us. We've got to be careful, but I think again, going back to your own frequency, your own vibration, what you put out as you were talking about being out there in the water and just being, you could be around, imagine being around a body of sharks and be at peace. Because if you aren't a threat to them, why should they feel threatened? Right? They're just looking at you as a different type of fish, and kind of wondrous of what you are. So, yeah, that doesn't mean that there isn't one that wants to look at you as dinner, but again, in life, the frequency we put out is the one that we resonate, the other that people pick up on. So, if you're going to live in fear, fear will find you. If you're going to live in love and trust, that is the vibration that will draw people to you. So, it's the same for all species, isn't it?
For sure, for sure. And I think the sentiment towards sharks has changed. It's unfortunate. Jaws is a great film, but
Mhm.
it's unfortunate what that did
Yeah.
for the sharks as well. So I mean, I think that obviously we know the importance of sharks to our ecosystem and to the food chain, and how they eat a lot of the diseased fish, and
Mhm.
just how vital they are towards the environment, just like all animals are, and especially a predator like a shark too. And so I mean, there's certain things in portrayals in the media that have, like, painted
Mhm.
them as monsters and this and that, and it's probably far from the truth. It is far from the truth, but it's nice that you do see like these marine biologists and different videographers, and professional divers who are like exposing this, like this other side, that that just, it's not like they're just going after you or anything like
Right.
that. And I think that sentiment is echoed in the fishing community these days, because I know that at least in the States out here, like all the people who maybe 30, 40 years ago were killing sharks, like whether it was to pay their bills or for sport or whatever it may be, like the whole sentiment now is all for conservation, and that this is something that needs to be protected. And it's just not, thankfully this kind of Jaws fear based mentality is slowly disappearing.
Yeah, it needs to happen faster, like in Japan. What they do with the
Yeah,
with the dolphins is just horrible. And of
it's
course,
yeah,
shark's fin soup. With the
yeah.
Chinese, there's still a few countries that need to kind of catch up and grow up.
Oh,
Um, there is actually a wonderful documentary on whales. We went down to 200 whales in the world left only. And, we've all seen Star Trek where without the whale, and we don't realize that every single species out there is put there for a reason.
mhm.
Everybody has a job to do, including us. And if you start upsetting that ecological balance, it starts costing us in many, many ways. So we need to respect that sea life. Like if you go to fish, don't overfish. Take what you need, but don't waste. Please don't waste, and don't get greedy.
Absolutely agreed entirely.
So well done on doing this, and let's all put it out there and share. Please go to what is the best place for them to go to support it, to get it up on a mainstream.
Well, we have a lot of great merch and t-shirts and cool stuff that you can support the film with at southbeachsharkclub.com. And then you can go on social media and just check out all the postings and these beautiful pictures of Miami Beach back in the day and these, cool different videos of archival footage and, like them, share them with others and stay in the loop with what's going on with the film. And as we continue on our journey to get distribution and release it to a broad audience, you'll be able to follow us and 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 just be a part of it with us, really.
Disney or Netflix, get on it, please.
That would be great.
Yeah. And I can see it really, either one of them being very, very good, but I can also see it very much being a Disney type thing as well. They do a lot of this type of thing. So, we want to see this. And I think folks is, you could write to Disney, you could write to Netflix and say, I want to see this movie here, right? Demand. When there is the public demand, then they had to adhere to it. And um, it's such a, it is not only representing that era, but it's a very good tale of that opulence and what it cost not only him but what it costs us as a society. But it's also a good showing us how we can be respectful and connect and live with nature and be at one with it, but also a wonderful journey of our own self-discovery, our own freedom and liberation before we go and kind of pigeonhole ourselves into something. We've got to make sure we have the balance. I remember one guy, a business guy who travels the world, and the beginning of COVID, he was saying, this has been the greatest gift for me. I can't travel to anyone. So I do all these Zoom meetings instead. And then I get out of my car and go for a surf and come back for the next meeting.
Oh, that's
So,
awesome.
wonderful balance of life. And we need that balance of life, folks. And if you really haven't experienced the ocean, please go and immerse yourself in it. Don't go in with fear of sharks or fear of this or that. Obviously common sense needs to prevail. Know where you're going and why. Also the current of the water, because that's very important. But go and get in the ocean and feel it. It is an exquisite relationship you'll have with the beach and the ocean. Everything that it brings out was inside of you. So again, folks, let's go and support them to make sure this movie gets out there. It's southbeachsharkclub.com. They're on YouTube as well with the short trailers there where you can get a taste of it. And, just get out there and experience it. A lot to learn from it, a lot to share with your kids of past life, and a really good reminder of that they're the custodians coming up. Make sure that they manage it well. So thanks so much for sharing with us today, Robert.
Thank you, Sarah. That was awesome. I had a
Until
great
next
time.
time, folks, get out for a swim, promote the movie, and just get in tuned with yourself and the ocean. It's a great place to be. Bye for now. We hope that you enjoyed the show. Find all of our shows on selfdiscoverymedia.com under podcasts or selfdiscoverymedia/shows. And for all our current shows, go to What's New. We are supported by you, the audience. You'll see a nice big shiny blue button for one-time donations or follow us on Patreon and you will be able to support us there. We enjoy bringing you such wisdom. And the next show will be up in just a moment.